On this edition of Life Focus,
210-4718. I think he said he was going in the Hudson.
They call it the Miracle on the Hudson. A commercial jet carrying 155 passengers loses both engines.
We knew we were in trouble.
And it's flying over one of the most densely populated cities in the world.
The buildings were basically getting closer and we were going lower and lower.
Passengers brace for the worst.
I do think that I thought I was going to die.
There's no way in my mind that I thought that we were going to survive.
I'd resigned myself to being a dead man.
On wings of prayer, on this edition of Life Focus.
Hello and welcome to Life Focus. I'm Dan Meyer. We've all heard the same announcement just before a flight takes off. In the unlikely event of a water landing, your seat cushion may be used as a flotation device. We've grown so accustomed to the message that we often tune it out. After all, an emergency water landing always seems so outlandish. And in the United States, that was true for almost half a century. But on January 15th, 2009, on a cold, wintry day in New York City, all of that would change. Ken Hume reports.
I'm not quite sure what God spared me for.
Former Marine Mark Hood faced death many times during his 20 years of service.
No one is trained to live through something like this.
Mark, along with another 154 people, will tell you surviving comes with a huge responsibility.
I think there are probably others on the plane who would have the same question of why we were spared.
I've been given a second chance, and I need to do something with that. I can't waste it.
Late afternoon on January 15, 2009, bitter cold winds drifted through LaGuardia Airport. But business passengers had no real reason to worry about flying that day.
It's funny because I have a routine every time when we travel, and when we go down the runway, I say a very quick prayer. It's just keep me safe, keep this plane safe, keep the pilot safe.
And we had sat for a while on the tarmac and it taxied a bit and I actually fell asleep.
Captain came on and said, "What a beautiful day for flying."
Denise Lockie sat next to Mark Hood. She jokingly bet him $5 that their flight would be late.
I said, "Well, we'll be here for at least 45 minutes. And he said, "Nah, we'll be off the ground before then." He was right.
Cactus 15.9, departure to contact line, maintain 15,000.
Mark notices something strange, a blur outside his window.
I happened to glance out of the corner of my eye out the window, and I saw a gray flash, and then I heard an immediate boom.
It was almost like a movie when the thwomp came through.
A jolt ripples through the cabin.
And it felt like a baseball bat had slammed into the wing.
It was enough to wake passenger Steve O'Brien from his sleep.
I remember, lifting my head up and it just felt like, whoom, like immediately you were in this situation.
A situation in which the plane loses both engines and glides through the air with no power. Captain Sullenberger radios the control tower.
This is Cactus 1539, hit birds, lost thrust on both engines, returning back towards LaGuardia.
I immediately felt my heart sink. I knew it was an engine. I'm an experienced flyer, and I knew there was a problem.
Do you want to try to land 1913?
We're unable. We may end up in the Hudson.
Denise looked for reassurance. She turned to a pilot in the cabin traveling as a passenger.
I looked at her and I mouthed, "Are we going to crash?" And she said, "Yes."
Yeah, I got into brace position and we kept going lower and lower and tearing and I started saying a Hail Mary.
That I thought I was going to die.
Captain Sullenberger had to make a split-second decision, either return to LaGuardia or go to nearby Teterboro Airport.
We can't do it. We're going to be in the Hudson.
At that point, Mark Hood holds hands with his seatmate, Denise, and begins to pray.
I said, Lord, it certainly looks like we're going to head into the water. I pray that your will be done here. I said, I pray that you give the captain strength. I pray that you would be with the families of everyone on the plane.
The crash happened on a chilly 20-degree January day, one of the coldest of New York's wintry season. The water temperature was a frigid 36 degrees. Military-trained passenger Mark Hood knew that there hasn't been a recorded case of water landing in the United States in almost 50 years. He and his seatmate, Denise Lockey, braced for their death.
Cactus 1529 over the George Washington Bridge wants to go to the airport right now.
Waiting for the crash took 3.5 minutes, but during that time, seconds turned into hours. Plenty of time to think.
Time slowed down. It felt like much longer than 3 to 5 minutes. And at that time, though, I was praying pretty much in overdrive and trying to ensure that I covered everybody.
The first thought, terrorizing fear.
My very first instinct in that first split second was, how do I get out of this? And then there's this acknowledgement that I can't. I'm here. I have to accept this. There's nothing I can do. I can't run away. I can't get out of this. I just have to sit here and allow what's going to happen to happen.
And that feeling that this was happening and it was reality came over me, and that was really hard and that was really dark.
The second thought, how loved ones would be affected by their passing.
I wasn't ready. I just kept thinking, no, my kids need me. My kids need me.
I actually thought about the driveway. That was in my head because I play with my kids out there. And I thought about them out there without me.
I wish I'd said, I love you more to my husband and to my family.
As time slowed down to what seemed like a screeching halt, Steve hoped for a life to come.
I'm getting ready to see my grandparents and people that were on the other side, and that's where I was going to be going.
Cactus 1549, radar contact is lost.
Eyewitnesses could see the 170,000-pound aircraft is now gliding toward the Hudson River.
I saw what looked to be a very small commercial airplane flying south along the Hudson River, making what appeared to be a very gradual landing.
Stillness falls over the cabin as the jet plunges a final 100 feet.
As far as the cabin, nothing was falling. It wasn't a free fall.
There was a tremendous sense of calm on that plane. There was no panic.
As he looks out the window, Mark could see the Hudson River getting closer.
I raised my head at the last minute and looked out the window and saw that we were heading towards the water, but it felt so controlled that I said, Lord, we may have a chance here.
Security cameras on the Manhattan Pier capture it all on tape from a distance. The jet throws up a spray of water as it slides on its belly. 911 calls start pouring in.
I'm looking at an airplane that's going down. It's on fire. A plane just crashed in the Hudson River.
We have a U.S. Airways airline jet in the water.
The first thing I do is reach over and tap Denise Lockey on the back and go, hey, we made it, we made it. We lived, we're going to live.
Saw the plane hit the water. It made a big splash.
And I looked at him and I said, yes, but are we alive? Because I didn't know if we were alive or not.
Division 6, stand by inlet, Sergeant.
No one can believe it. The plane is in one piece and actually floating on the water. Everyone is still alive.
And I remember people running through the cabin. And I was still in my seat because I didn't know whether we should get up or what to do and how to react until the flight crew came on verbally because there was no PA system. There is some recollection that they said evacuate, but I don't remember those words, evacuate.
Battalion 1 acting 9 only.
Passengers scrambled to get out of the aircraft, afraid the plane would sink or explode.
People were up, undoing seatbelts. There were people barking commands, get the door open, get out.
It's just an explosion of people to get off that plane at that time. It was just like, go, go, go.
Plane doors open with a rush of bitter cold air.
It's the freshest, sweetest tasting air I have ever breathed in my life. And it felt like a new rebirth, so to speak.
I just remember how incredibly cold it was.
10-4 will contact the Coast Guard.
Not only the air temperature, but the water temperature.
Division 1, be advised, at this time the Coast Guard is reporting they have 4 ferries en route.
But my first reaction was to look at the people that were actually in the water swimming.
Among them, Steve and Pam, who thought swimming was their only escape.
I swam to the life raft, and at that point, I do remember looking up, and now I know that it was Mark Hood, who I looked at and said, is there room for me?
What's your location and what is your status?
When we pulled Pam into the raft, she looked like she was visibly suffering with her lips and her face. And, you know, Steve also, I think he was starting to feel the effects of the cold.
I do remember getting in the life raft and looking up and thinking, or saying, where are the boats, where are the helicopters?
And we're still trying to ascertain number of people, injuries.
And that's when Denise, I think, came over and gave me a hug. And I remember turning to her and saying, is this a dream? Or is this a dream? And she said, no, this isn't a dream. And
he was in such shock after we had pulled him out. His face was glazed over. His eyes were dilated.
The pilot stated that he got all the people off the plane onto the wing.
As we identified all the threats and made sure everyone was safe, I pulled out my cell phone because I wanted Lisa to know that I was alive.
But Mark's fingers would not function, so he called the last number he had dialed, his sales manager, who in turn called Lisa and told her husband was in the Hudson.
You're supposed to panic at that point, but I just have this calm about me. But I've gotten this very important news that I can't comprehend, so my mind is trying to wrap itself around this information.
Lisa immediately turns on the news. Nothing about a plane crash is being reported. That's when the phone rings. It's Mark.
He sounded so in charge and calm. In the moment, meaning it's a stressful moment, but okay with where he was.
Where he was? On a mission.
My time in the Marine Corps prepared me for time in the water, so to speak. Now, again, as I was in the raft, I began to assess threats around us. Now, one of the threats that I immediately thought was if the plane sinks, there's all these folks in the water. And again, I had no idea whether the ferries would get out there in time.
Experts say you can only survive 5 minutes in 36-degree water. Steve and Pam didn't have much time.
They put me in the center of the raft and tried to get people around me because I was very cold.
Her lips were blue, and that she had lost so much color in her face that I wondered how in the world we're ever going to keep her from going into a hypothermic shock.
There's no way in my mind that I thought that we were going to survive.
I would rather have been left face down in the Hudson, dead, than to have done anything dishonorable that would have dishonored my faith, my family, the Marine Corps, or the Citadel. And that meant putting other people first.
This former Marine, along with the heroic captain, were the last to leave the raft.
I looked at Captain Sullenberger. I said, sir, would you like to go up the ladder before me? And he looked at me and he goes, no, in a very gruff voice, I'll be the last one out of the raft.
At this time, as per what the pilot is saying, there is nobody left on the plane.
Because they landed near the ferry boat terminal, all 155 on board were rescued in the nick of time, just before the U.S. Airways plane sank.
I look at that experience and everything that happened as really one of those really thin places between where I was and where God was on the other side, and there was a real thin veil, not just for me, but for everybody else on that plane.
Little did Mark, Denise, Pam, and Steve realize that their shared experience would forge a lifelong friendship.
When I see Steve, Pam, or Mark for the rest of my life, I think we're going to be friends. I have no fear that we're not going to continue seeing each other.
I'm saying prayers of thanks as we're moving forward.
But moving forward would be the hardest thing he and his 3 new friends would have to do.
Almost everybody aboard U.S. Airways Flight 1549 believes that they should be very grateful for being a survivor of a plane crash. But they also can't ignore the profound questions of why they were aboard that plane and why they lived. These questions are all symptoms of post-traumatic stress, which began the very night they came home. Ken Hume concludes this story.
Brace for impact, Sully did calmly deliver. We're taking this flying bus into the river. The night of the crash, I didn't sleep much, and I stood up writing what I remembered happened. 155 hearts, another day will beat. Miracle on the Hudson, now life is so sweet.
And every time I would close my eyes, I would just immediately wake up. So I didn't sleep the entire evening. I was just trying to get some account of what happened.
It was like a fast-forward movie with images that I had buried or images that I'd forgotten about or images of people that I saw from a different angle.
After rescuing a raft full of people that day, former Marine Mark Hood emotionally broke down.
It becomes very, 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 very depressing when you think about how close you came to the process of dying.
This tremendous sadness lingers for months.
Part of the sadness is, geez, why did this happen to me? Why did this have to happen to me? There's the, trauma from the plane, the trauma from the water, the trauma from being in the life raft. It was a terrifying experience that you went through, and a sadness to reflect back on that. That's always going to be there.
Almost anything can trigger an emotional response, such as the tragic news of another plane crash.
There's this sense of why them, why not me? There's this incredible relief, and I am so lucky and so blessed in juxtaposition with, but why them? And so it's hard to get it all kind of, straight.
You have highs, you have lows, you have disbelief, you have inner turmoil, you have outer turmoil. Your body reacts in many, many ways.
People have said, are you back to normal? And I said, I just don't know that there's a normal anymore. I don't know what normal will be, and I don't think it will be the same.
And the question, what if, doesn't seem to escape their minds.
What if we'd had to ditch further down the Hudson? The ferries might not have gotten to us for 10 minutes. What if the current had been stronger? Pam and Steve might not have gotten to the raft. What if we lost so much altitude that we were heading for an apartment building in the Bronx? There's so many what ifs. It can't be explained away in a worldly manner. It can't.
Never in aviation history has, 2 engines been taken out by birds and then landed on water. It's never happened before. So there's only 155 people in the world that have experienced that, right?
Planes are not designed to land on a river like that. People aren't designed to come out of a plane like that into water.
While Mark struggles with putting details back together, an unexpected email brings the beginning of healing.
Steve sent me an email and said, my name's Steve O'Brien, and I think you pulled me out of the Hudson. When he sent me the email, it was quite enlightening and quite a blessing to have someone reach out like that to me.
Hey, Steve. How's it going?
Our cameras are there when Mark and Steve meet for the very first time since the accident.
Hey, Michael. How are you doing?
This is Megan.
Hello, Megan. I'm Mark Hood. Nice to meet you.
The two have formed a brotherhood of sorts, a special connection that only they could share.
There's like this old Scottish poem. It says something like, many times does Christ come in the guise of a stranger. God put Mark Hood in that life raft to help me out.
Though many passengers have received professional counseling, some feel that talking to each other is a vital part of their recovery.
Being a survivor can be very lonely. It's paralyzing, isn't it?
Totally paralyzing.
Mark and Steve decide to meet up with the 2 people who were their helpmates during that cold January day.
The raft was not out when I actually got onto the wing.
For Pam, filling in the blanks comes by connecting with her new friends.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yep.
I think we're all looking for a timeline.
She kept saying, I can't see, I can't see, I can't see. And I said, oh, I know I can't either.
There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that I haven't quite put together yet. And I think that's very, very good for me, and I think it's very good for other people. Once we have a better understanding of what transpired after the fact.
Just every little thing on the plane really gets me.
Yeah, and you immediately go, whoa,
yeah.
What's that? Right.
Meetings like these help solidify those surreal memories.
I know it's silly now, but it's saying, is there room in there? I think I had visions of Titanic. No, go away. No room.
You knew logically you were there, but you didn't feel it yet. There hadn't been this merger, and it's hard to explain, but again, other people who were there understand what we're talking about.
So you flew that night with everybody? Okay.
With the same pants I had on and the same shoes.
It's just great to hear everybody's different perspective. When you get together with people like that, it's not as lonely, I guess.
Now, when Steve plays basketball with his children, he's grateful that he's alive to share these precious moments.
I'm appreciating my family more, appreciating my kids more.
For the survivors, the road ahead will have its share of bumps, and their lives will be changed forever.
I've become a completely different person. I'm going to sit back and enjoy life to its fullest every day. I'm going to be more patient. I'm going to try to do a little bit more in the community.
Don't take the little things for granted. The fact that you can hug your family, kiss your daughter, your son, or your wife, or even pick up the phone and call a friend.
We have looked at life as more sweeter and more precious.
And then what time's your flight back tomorrow?
There's a lot more important things than money or professional success and different things that people put an emphasis on.
I bet her $5 that we were going to take off on time.
Oh, and that $5 wager between Mark and Denise, well, she finally paid up.
And I went over and I handed him a little plastic bag with a card, his $5, in the New York Magazine article. And of course, we just looked at each other, and he stood up and I stood up, and we just hugged one another, and I think there might have been a tear or two.
Through it all four have found beauty in their story, beyond the miraculous survival.
Even in your deepest despair, when you think you're alone and you think that things are absolutely at their worst, is probably when God's there the most.
Everyone wanted a happy ending. It's this validation that people can survive, and it's a feel-good story at the end of the day.
There was pockets of humanity and self-sacrifice all over that plane. And the beauty and the joy of the human race striving at that point for one significant survival moment just gives me a true feeling of joy. That's the beauty of Flight 1549.
Many coincidences contributed to the amazing events surrounding the Hudson River crash. The touchdown happened before dark, allowing the pilot to clearly navigate the plane. The crash took place at rush hour, where ferries could rescue passengers before hypothermia would take their lives, or before the plane would sink. Every single one of the 155 passengers lived to tell this uplifting story. Whether an observer or a survivor, the Hudson River crash allows us to believe that miracles still do happen. That's all for today's Life Focus. I'm Dan Meyer. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you again next time.
More information about this program can be found online at www.lifefocus.tv. The title of today's program is on the screen.
Anyone who says that they didn't have faith, all they got to do is go back and look at that plane or think back to what happened, and they'll see that it was the hand of God, top to bottom, that brought those 155 souls to this earth safely.
The peace, the calm, the resolve, all of that is strength that I would not have without my faith.
God was on that plane, and he was either going to carry us over to the other side, or he was going to stay with us, and he stayed with us.